And I will start by giving the floor to Mr. Paul Stoffels, who is Vice Chair of the Executive Committee and Chief Scientific Officer, Johnson&Johnson. Mr. Stoffels, you have the floor. Just press the speak button. The interventions are kindly requested to be for 5 minutes to all distinguished guests. Please, you have the floor, Mr. Stoffels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Confident, Dr. Bussoy, Honorary Commissioner Kyriakides and Breton, honorary members of the Parliament and the committees. My name is Paul Stoffels. I'm a Belgian physician and the global leader for the COVID-19 vaccine project. First, I would like to provide you an update on the Johnson&Johnson approach to develop, produce, and distribute the COVID-19 vaccine. Since 2011, Johnson&Johnson has invested heavily in vaccine research and development, including in our Ad26 vaccine vector technology, which we used to develop our Ebola vaccine, which received European Commission approval last year, and our Zika, RSV, and HIV vaccine candidates. We conducted formulation work and stability studies showing the stability of our vaccine at 2 to 8 Celsius for several months. The company also invested in building highly specialized manufacturing capabilities required to produce these vaccines. These biologic and technological capabilities enable us to accelerate our efforts towards our COVID-19 vaccine rapidly. We began working on a vaccine candidate in January last year, as soon as the coronavirus sequence list first became available. We leveraged our technology, rapidly constructed multiple vaccine candidates, conducted extensive preclinical work, and began initial clinical trials in July last year in Europe. In mid-September, we launched a large-scale phase 3 pivotal trial in 45,000 volunteers, and last month we released our top-line interim data. The data showed that our single-dose vaccine addresses the most crucial healthcare needs in the pandemic: the prevention of severe COVID-19 disease and the prevention of hospitalization and death, 28 days post the vaccination with a single dose. And importantly, this result was achieved across countries with emerging variants, including the virulent B.1.351 variant first observed in South Africa. Based on these clinical trials, we submitted an application to the regulatory authorities seeking an emergency use application in the US, which will be reviewed by the FDA AdCom tomorrow, a conditional market authorization with EMA in Europe, and an emergency use listing with the WHO, all submitted already. During the same period, starting in March last year, we began expanding our manufacturing capabilities in parallel, building and scaling up capacity in the US, Europe, Africa, and Asia, with a goal to supply more than 1 billion doses of the vaccine globally by the end of this year on a not-for-profit basis during the pandemic. This was a major undertaking because manufacturing adeno-26-based vaccines in large quantities involves highly specialized and unique infrastructure and equipment, not readily available on the market at scale needed for the pandemic, as well as highly trained and experienced personnel. While we are moving fast, we have remained absolutely committed to making sure that the vaccine follows all guidelines with regard to good manufacturing practices and quality control. Let me now turn to the key question we are focused on today: how to increase the capacity of COVID-19 vaccine production to improve delivery. One answer: collaboration. We have been working around the clock to build 3 vaccine production plants in Europe, in the US, and Asia, and contract 7 fill and finish plants globally as part of a global supply network to deliver our commitments to the world. Due to the global interconnectivity of our production and supply chain processes, one batch of the J&J vaccine will likely pass through multiple countries through the course of various manufacturing stages in the journey from vaccine substance to finished vial for injection. To accelerate production, we have built our own plants as well as entered into agreements with established manufacturers to expand capacity. Last week, we announced an additional collaboration with Sanofi Pasteur as part of our global network to manufacturing. As these sites come online and our supply increases throughout the year, we are very confident that we will meet our 2021 commitment to the European Union of 200 million dosages. With a single dose, this translates to a potential to vaccinate 200 million people during the course of the year. As we make progress, we always keep in mind our long-standing commitment to ensuring widespread global access to to our innovations. I also wanted to highlight that Johnson & Johnson announced an agreement in principle with Gavi to provide up to 500 million doses of our COVID-19 vaccine candidate to low-income countries via the COVAX facility. These doses will be distributed starting the second half of 2021 and continue to 2022, provided the vaccine candidate is, of course, proven to be safe and effective and approved by the WHO and local authorities. The unique manufacturing and filling capacity we need requires technical conversion of every site we have brought on board, which is on the critical path for each site to start up. We have assessed and filtered nearly 100 sites across the world, including 41 sites from Europe, based on specific criteria of feasibility, technical needs, volumes, and timelines. The large majority of the sites we surveyed would not be ready to produce vaccines before 2022. In the coming months, we are depending on a global supply chain network. That said, in July, we expect to have an end-to-end integrated European regional manufacturing network established as part of a global manufacturing network, which is always critical for business continuity. When we started developing a COVID-19 vaccine in January 2020, none of the specialized capacities that we needed for enabling supply in 2021 was available. The maximum number of vaccines we had manufactured with the existing capabilities was 2 million dosages of our Ebola vaccine for Africa. So this meant building brand new facilities for drug substance that is now undergoing validation. In less than 1 year, we had to set up production and manufacturing capacity from the ground up. Different vaccine technologies require specific manufacturing capabilities.
Please, Dr. Stoffels, yes. Prepare to conclude.
Yes. The fill and finish readily available. And finally, I want to thank the EU for the support and the significant contribution as a partner for Johnson & Johnson's ability to develop our vaccine at an accelerated pace. One more thank you for the European Medicines Agency for the 24/7 availability in guiding vaccine development. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stoffels. Thank you, and we are eagerly waiting the approval in US and especially in EU for the vaccine. And I go now to Pfizer Group. We have together with us Madam Angela Huang, President Global Biopharm. She's accompanied by Mr. Germain Morin, Vice President Vaccine Supplies Chain. And I invite Madam Huang to take the floor, kindly. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Canfin, Chairman Bussoy, Commissioner Kyriakides, Commissioner Breton, and honorable members of the European Parliament. Thank you for inviting me here today. My name is Angela Wang, and I'm Group President of the Pfizer Biopharmaceuticals Group, and I worked here at Pfizer for 24 years. We are a global company, and in the first months of the pandemic, like you, I watched the reach of this virus spread from my colleagues in Asia to the cities in Europe, and finally to my home in America. As we watched the virus spread around the world, we came to understand quickly that this crisis is one that we all share and will only be defeated by collective resolve. From simple act of wearing masks to protect one another, to the sharing of medicines and supplies across the borders, the world has stepped up to this challenge, and Pfizer has committed to doing the same. We knew from the very beginning of the COVID-19 crisis that it would take both the power of science and the power of collaboration to defeat this virus, and that the two are deeply intertwined. And that is why, in March of 2020, Pfizer issued a 5-point plan calling for unprecedented industry collaboration in the fight against COVID-19. This included sharing tools and insights, marshaling our experts, applying our drug development expertise to help smaller biotech companies advance their most promising candidates, and offering our manufacturing capabilities and partnering with both the private and public sector to improve future rapid response. Pfizer has a best-in-industry supply network with 12 Pfizer-owned sites and over 80 supplies in Europe, and we implemented a comprehensive preparedness plan in our manufacturing site operations. Our first response came in March of 2020, when we saw a 200% rise in the need for ICU medicines to treat COVID-19 patients. We worked quickly to increase our supply. We shipped 17 critical medicines across Europe working with governments, hospitals, and other healthcare institutions to ensure access to these essential medicines wherever they were needed. We also saw the need for a vaccine. And over the last 11 months, we combined our industry-leading vaccine development, manufacturing, and distribution capabilities with BioNTech's expertise in innovative mRNA technology to quickly scale, manufacture, and distribute large quantities of high-quality COVID-19 vaccine. Given the urgency of the pandemic, Pfizer self-funded more than $2 billion at risk to run clinical development and manufacturing processes in parallel and at scale. Collaborating closely with regulatory and health authorities around the world, we compressed timelines that typically take years into months, and those that take months into weeks. And as a result, we were able to move at the speed of science and make the seemingly impossible possible by delivering in less than a year the world's first COVID-19 vaccine. We have scaled our manufacturing operations. We made modifications to our production processes to increase yields. We've extended our production lines. We've added suppliers and global contract manufacturers everywhere to increase our total manufacturing capacity. And all of this is resulting in our ability to deliver more doses than we originally forecasted, with a newly stated global goal of 2 billion doses in 2021. It gives us great pride that 70% of those doses will be produced in Europe at BioNTech's manufacturing sites in Germany and at Pfizer's state-of-the-art manufacturing site in Puurs, Belgium. As of the 22nd of February, our vaccine is available in 64 countries, including all EU member states, with 31 million doses shipped in the EU and deliveries accelerating every month. What's more, we have a 99.9% success rate in all of our vaccine shipments. For the EU, Pfizer is fulfilling our dose deliveries in line with agreed schedules. We've committed to delivering 500 million doses to the EU in 2021, with quantities increasing every month, including a tripling of doses in Q2 compared with Q1. We are working closely with governments and NGOs to ensure that those who most urgently need our vaccine can get it. This includes our recent agreement with the COVAX facility to distribute vaccines to developing countries. In fact, 36% of our global allocation is directed towards the low and middle income countries. But we know that the COVID-19 crisis is far from over, and we will continue to move at the speed of science to bring it under control. We have ongoing studies to assess vaccine effectiveness against variants with the key mutations from the UK strain and the South African strains. We are conducting studies for children between 12 to 15 years old, and we've recently initiated safety and efficacy evaluations for pregnant women. In conclusion, I would like to express Pfizer's sincere thanks to the 46,000 trial participants, the hundreds of investigators, and the thousands of Pfizer and BioNTech scientists, clinicians, and manufacturing professionals, especially our colleagues based in Puurs, who worked literally day and night for almost a year now, knowing that every moment matters. I would also like to share my appreciation of the close working relationship with the European Parliament, the European Commission, the EU member states, regulators, and other key stakeholders. And finally, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We move to the third panelist, and Thomas Triomphe, Executive Vice President, Head of Sanofi Pasteur.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Dear Mr. Canfin, dear Mr. Boussoy, honorable members of the European Parliament, thank you very much for inviting me today and for the opportunity to share Sanofi views on how to increase COVID-19 vaccine production capacities in Europe. 5 months ago, I was here with you sharing all the efforts we are doing to develop and produce vaccines against COVID-19 and to ensure wide access to those. Our engagement has not changed. We are committed since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic to play our part through developing and manufacturing our own vaccines with two different technological platforms, the adjuvanted recombinant protein vaccine with our partner GSK and the mRNA vaccine with our partner Translate Bio. We have faced bumps on the road with the results of our phase 1, phase 2 trial last December, which required us to rethink our development plan, taking into account the efficacy of the vaccines being approved and the evolving epidemiology. Together with GSK, we announced the initiation of our new phase 2 study to enable us to identify the final vaccine formulation for adults of all ages. We are confident that our vaccine has strong potential. Encouraged by the good preclinical data obtained, we look forward to further progressing this vaccine candidate into phase 3 in Q2 of this year for approval in Q4 of 2021. But you might ask yourself, isn't that too late? Do we even need new COVID-19 vaccines? The fact is that many unknowns remain on the evolution of this pandemic and of this virus. Member States and the Commission are rightly turning their attention to the issues of variants. We strongly believe that our adjuvanted recombinant vaccine will bring value to public health as it will support a diversified portfolio of technologies available in Europe with trusted and established platforms. And second, it will provide further clinical efficacy against variants that are circulating at the time of the new phase 3 we're going to launch in Q2 2021. Our confidence is reinforced by the recent results from the phase 3 trial with the adjuvanted recombinant protein vaccine from Novavax, which we just heard before. We show that this technology can bring high vaccine efficacy against a broad scope of COVID-19 variants circulating. We will confirm this with our forthcoming phase 3 trial. Broadening the scope of vaccines available maximizes the chances to prevent, mitigate, and respond to potential impact of variants. Latest epidemiological findings seem to demonstrate that the virus will continue to evolve, meaning that our goal is to sustain a scope of preventive vaccination options that can holistically address the virus evolution, a bit similarly to flu, if you wish. Coming back now to the capacity of COVID-19 vaccine production. As you know, Sanofi has a strong industrial capacity in Europe, and we have decided to support BioNTech and Johnson&Johnson in manufacturing their vaccines in Europe, in our German and French sites respectively. We are also in the process of significantly ramping up our European capacities to manufacture our adjuvanted recombinant protein vaccine, and the support of the European Union to these efforts is absolutely critical. Developing and producing 100 million of doses in a couple of months brings major challenges, with important gaps that cannot be solved in a single day. In this regard, it's critical to have a structure in Europe allowing more permanent and well-resourced capacity for public and private collaborations in the field of response and preparedness to major public health crises. The recently announced HERA incubator and the future European Authority HERA go both in the right direction. To succeed in turning these ideas into reality, we need political will and substantial investment into expertise and resources at the right scale. Sanofi strongly supports the proposal of immediate and longer-term flexible manufacturing capacity for vaccines and medicines. Last June, as you know, we announced €500 million investment in the creation of an evolutive facility, state-of-the-art industrial site in France that will use in the future the latest innovative vaccine production technologies. Sanofi is therefore well engaged in building such collaboration and the needed industrial capacities. But beyond industrial production capacities, I'd like to stress the importance of having the development and regulatory framework adapted for next generation, second waves of COVID-19 vaccines. Regulators such as EMA, FDA are doing a fantastic job in adapting the regulatory procedures to accelerate the approval of COVID-19 vaccines to the new variants. However, it focuses only on the already approved vaccines. Our phase 3 study will probably be the last one, ethically possible, with an efficacy study design. Therefore, we absolutely need international regulators to propose a path forward for developers to enable the use of alternative study designs and or so-called correlate of protections, so that we have more vaccines available in 22 and beyond with more producers. We need the EU to facilitate this work as a key enabler for supply security globally. Last but not least, I'd like to address the topic of liability, which was central in the hearing back a few months ago. Let me repeat that we need countries to set up non-fault compensation systems to ensure that people who suffer adverse events attributable to COVID-19 vaccines will get appropriate and timely compensation without having to resort to lengthy, costly litigations with uncertain outcomes. WHO just announced, and that's a very good news, the first and only global vaccine injury compensation mechanism covering 92 low and middle income countries eligible to COVAX. I congratulate the COVAX facility for that. In Europe to date, only 11 countries have such systems in place. It is urgent for the others to move to protect all actors involved in vaccination, including patients, governments, healthcare providers, distributors, and manufacturers. With this, I thank you very much again for your invitation, and I hand over to our chairs, Mr. Confin and Mr. Boussoy, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Triomphe. So we move to the last speaker for the second panel, Shuri Moon, co-director of the Global Health Center based in Geneva. Okay. Right.
Let me just wait for the...
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can you see the slides? Here we go. Okay, I have a very simple message for the honourable members of the Parliament, which is that we need to make a bigger pie, and the question is really how to do that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay. Thank you. I think, unfortunately, what we have seen over the last year is that countries have been fighting over a very small piece of the pie. And you can see that all the arrows are really pointing in the same direction. We need to expand global vaccine production capacity for epidemiological, ethical, and economic reasons. This is very much in the self-interest of Europe, and it's also a way for Europe to show solidarity with the world. Currently, we don't even have enough doses to supply the COVAX facility, which has been strongly supported by Europe. Next slide, please. I think the rationale for why we need to expand global production capacity is clear, but the how might not be as obvious. And I'd like to offer you 4 ingredients that are needed to bake this bigger pie. The first is better intelligence on production. We need clearer real-time information on what kind of production capacities we have. We looked at 65 manufacturing agreements that are available in the public domain, and we still cannot develop a clear picture of volumes, timelines, technology types or stage of production, locations, what kind of technology has been transferred, what has actually been produced, by which I mean output, and where the bottlenecks are. Governments can and should require this kind of information to be disclosed via contracts, and we've seen that some contracts, in fact, have required this information. Next slide, please. The reason that governments can ask for this information is because they have quite a lot of leverage, and that's because governments have been co-producing COVID-19 vaccines, have de-risked and subsidized every step of the process, from research and development, the regulatory approval, which has been accelerated through subsidizing production in many cases, procurement, and even taking on liability in a number of cases. Next slide, please. What you see here is our estimate, and this is again an estimate based on publicly available information of where that leverage might be used. So on the left-hand side, you see investments in research and development of COVID-19 vaccines, with the European Union and its member states having invested approximately 1.5 billion euros. In the middle, you should have a picture of subsidies for manufacturing, but the data is very, very poor on this. We really need more transparency here. But on the right-hand side, what you see again again, is an estimate of how much is being spent on procurement. And you can see that the European Commission is the single largest customer, and according to our estimates, has now put on the table 21.7 billion euros. So there's a way to use this leverage both at the beginning as an at-risk investor in R&D and at the end of the process as the single largest world's consumer of these goods to actually get more information on production capacities from companies. Next slide, please. The next ingredient is that we really need to expand technology transfer. So far, there's been little incentive to do so, lots of barriers, and it should not be a surprise that technology transfer has been far too limited. What we have heard from every single speaker from industry up until now is that this is feasible. They've all been doing it for the last year. We've also heard that some firms are much more willing than others. I think that it's very important to try to move as quickly as possible. We are in the middle of a global emergency, and anything we can do to facilitate and accelerate production should be adopted, including, of course, the temporary waiver on COVID-19 intellectual property protection being debated at the WTO, where Europe has unfortunately been opposed and has blocked the adoption of this waiver up until now. We know that market incentives are not aligned, and we're not going to magically get technology transfer. We're not going to magically get enough production of the right vaccines to actually meet global need. Every country is at risk of being a victim of export restrictions, and we know that there are a lot of bottlenecks that governments need to help resolve. Next slide, please. What you can see here is just a picture of the number of agreements that companies have adopted to try to expand manufacturing capacity since March 2020. And I think you can see, indeed, companies have been very active in expanding capacity, and further expansion should be possible. Next slide, please. The fourth and last ingredient is public stewardship, which is absolutely essential. We know that COVID may become endemic. We don't know the duration of immunity. We know it's mutating. And this means that we need to not only adopt vaccines, but also that people may need to be revaccinated over and over again. All of this translates into a huge and lucrative commercial market. This actually creates disincentives to expand production today because companies want to control their technologies. For example, the mRNA platform is extremely lucrative for a number of other indications beyond COVID. We know some companies have an incentive to increase their own supply to increase sales, but only under monopoly conditions. What companies actually do will be, of course, shaped profoundly by the policies that governments adopt. Governments have also historically played a very central role in ensuring technology transfer and should do so again today. Next slide, please. Public stewardship is also essential because we have very many significant risks that remain in terms of we don't know how COVID-19 will fluctuate. We don't know what the new variants will look like. And what has not gotten enough attention today is in this mad rush to earn a profit on COVID-19 vaccines, we're at high risk of creating shortages of other essential vaccines needed, for example, to prevent childhood illness. In order to prevent this type of public health disaster, we need strong, steady public stewardship, both at the European level, but also in order to expand production worldwide. The HERA incubator, I believe, is a very important step in this direction, but it should be looking not only to produce within Europe, but in fact to ensure that all countries are able to manufacture, or all countries are able to access manufactured goods, Many middle-income countries are very interested in doing so. Many governments now recognize the strong national security interest in having some kind of vaccine production capacity in their own regions, and I think Europe will find many willing partners. Next slide.
Please try to conclude.
I'd like to
kindly.
just conclude. Thank you. 3 quick conclusions. We need more transparency, much better intelligence on production. We can get that intelligence because the public sector has tremendous leverage if it wants to use it. It also has responsibility and capacity to expand that production. But this production must not only meet European needs, it must meet global needs. And at the end of the day, this will protect European citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. After a very interesting exchange of views and very interactive, we are still 50 minutes delay, so we'll not get catch the eye, we'll not take catch the eye, and also we'll try to accelerate a little bit. We'll have 4 interventions and then the answers. And once again, please indicate to which you address the question. And we start